The Mafia boss was stepping onto the wet pavement when something small tugged at his leather jacket. Not a gun, not a blade, but a trembling hand holding 3 crumpled dollar bills. He looked down. A little boy stood in front of him, face streaked with tears and grime, wearing a gray hoodie that was too big for him. In one hand, he clutched a soggy missing flyer. In the other, he held the money up like a peace offering. "Take it," the boy choked out, his voice cracking. "It's $3. It's all I have." Sun Wu's bodyguards moved instantly. The man in the background reached for his weapon, stepping forward to intercept the threat. But Sun Wu raised a tattooed hand, freezing them in place. Nobody offered the Iceman $3. People usually offered him their life savings just to stay alive. He crouched down, ruining the crease in his designer trousers to get eye level with the child. "You know who I am, boy?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. The boy swallowed hard, wiping his nose on his sleeve. "I know," he whispered. "You're the bad man." "Then why are you giving me money?" "I need to hire you," the boy said, trembling but not backing down. "Because the police won't help. They said my sister is just a runaway." That made Sun Wu pause. The boy leaned in closer, his eyes wide with terrified desperation. "But I saw the men who took her," the boy whispered. "And my dad said you're a monster. So I need you, because only a monster can scare the other monsters away." That was when Sun Wu went silent. He noticed the boy's shoes were taped together, his cheeks red from crying, and the sheer terror in his eyes that he was trying to swallow down. The Mafia boss slowly reached out and took the $3, not because he wanted the money, but because the contract this boy was offering was worth more than gold. "Stay with me until the end, because what this little boy asked Sun Wu to do next broke every rule the underworld had." Sun Wu had ruled the K-Town district for 10 years. He built his reputation on the 7 Stars Code: absolute silence, absolute order, and absolute violence when necessary. His territory stretched from the neon-lit gambling dens to the shipping docks, and everyone knew the rules. You paid your dues, you never spoke to the police, and you never, ever involved innocent civilians in syndicate business. That Friday night started like any other. Sun Wu was leaving his private lounge, the Onyx, after a meeting with his lieutenants. The rain was coming down hard, reflecting the neon signs on the asphalt. His black sedan waited at the curb, engine purring, while his security detail scanned the perimeter like hawks. The neighborhood knew this routine. When Sun Wu stepped out at 2 a.m., the street usually cleared. Drunks sobered up and walked away, shop owners pulled down their shutters, and the smart ones crossed the street before he even looked in their direction. But this little boy, Curtis, didn't cross the street. He didn't run. He walked straight toward the most dangerous man in the city with a crumpled flyer and $3 in his fist. Sun Wu had seen desperate people before. Gamblers begging for one more week, businessmen crying over bad investments, rivals pleading for mercy. Desperation usually looked ugly. It smelled like sweat and fear. This was different. This child wasn't desperate in the way adults get desperate. He was on a mission. He was shaking, yes, but he was standing his ground like a soldier who had nothing left to lose. His clothes were cheap and damp from the rain, but his eyes held a fire that Sun Wu hadn't seen in a long time. Pure, agonizing love for his sister. "What's your name?" Sun Wu asked, still crouching, ignoring the rain soaking his expensive jacket. His men shifted nervously behind him, hands hovering near their holsters. They had never seen the boss tolerate a stranger this close, let alone a crying child. "Curtis," the boy whispered. "How old are you, Curtis?" "8. Sun Wu glanced at his head of security, who gave a confused, almost imperceptible shrug. In their world, children were liabilities, they were weaknesses. Smart bosses didn't talk to kids, they ignored them. "Where are your parents, Curtis?" Sunwoo asked gently. That's when the dam broke. Not a scream, but a quiet, painful sob that shook the boy's small shoulders. "Dad's at work. He works nights," Curtis said, trying to steady his voice. "But Deborah, she didn't come home from school. It's been 2 days." Sunwoo felt a cold shift in his demeanor. 2 days? "The police said she probably ran off with a boy," Curtis said, holding up the flyer. "But she didn't. I saw the white van. I saw the man with the snake tattoo on his neck grab her." Sunwoo's jaw tightened. A snake tattoo. He knew exactly who Curtis was describing. The Viper Tong. A chaotic, dishonorable gang that had been trying to push drugs and traffic into his territory for months. Taking a teenager off the street? That was a declaration of war. But looking at Curtis, holding out that $3 like it could buy a miracle, Sunwoo felt something inside his chest crack open. Maybe it was the memory of his own childhood on these streets. Maybe it was the fact that this boy had called him a monster, and he realized he wanted to prove the boy wrong. "You hired me, Curtis," Sunwoo said, pocketing the $3, "and I don't break contracts." Sunwoo signaled his men to stand down with a sharp, decisive flick of his wrist. Jin, his chief of security, stepped forward anyway, his earpiece buzzing with updates on the night's schedule. "Sir, the council is waiting at the warehouse. We can't be seen standing on a sidewalk negotiating with a stray." Sunwoo didn't even look up. He kept his gaze locked on Curtis, whose small frame was shivering violently now, the adrenaline fading into exhaustion. "The council can wait," Sunwoo said, his voice cutting through the sound of the rain like a razor. "We have business here." He looked back at the boy. The $3 felt heavy in his pocket, heavier than the gun holstered under his arm. "Curtis," he said softly, ignoring the water soaking into his knees, "you said your dad works nights. If he's at work and Deborah is gone, where have you been for the last 2 days?" The boy looked down at his taped-up sneakers, scuffing the toe against the wet pavement. He looked smaller than 8. He looked like a ghost haunting the edges of a city that had already forgotten him. "At home," he whispered. "In the closet." Sunwoo felt a muscle in his jaw jump. "Alone?" "Dad thinks she's at a friend's house. He comes home when I'm asleep and leaves before I wake up. I didn't want to tell him yet," Curtis stammered, fresh tears mixing with the rain on his face. "I didn't want him to be sad. Deborah said I have to be the man of the house when she's not there." "So you've been in that apartment by yourself since she was taken?" Sunwoo asked, the coldness in his stomach spreading. "What have you been eating?" Curtis reached into his hoodie pocket and pulled out a crinkled, empty wrapper. "Saltines," he said, his voice barely audible over the hum of the idling Cadillac. "And some ketchup packets. I saved the $3 for you. I didn't spend it on food because finding Deborah is more important than being hungry." Sunwoo stared at the empty wrapper. He had lieutenants who wouldn't skip a meal for loyalty, let alone starve themselves for days to save a few dollars for a long-shot prayer. This kid, this shivering 8-year-old boy, had more grit in his pinky finger than half the gangsters running the city. "Jin," Sunwoo said, standing up slowly. His movement was fluid, but his eyes were dark, unreadable. "Boss?" "Get the boy a jacket, and get him something to eat. Real food." Sunwoo looked down at Curtis, whose eyes were wide with a mix of fear and hope. "You're not alone anymore, Curtis. You hired me, and when you hire Sunwoo, you get the full service." He placed a hand on the boy's shoulder, feeling the thin bones through the damp fabric. "Now, dry your eyes. We have work to do." The heavy door of the sedan slammed shut, sealing out the noise of the rain and the city. Inside, the air smelled of expensive leather and conditioned silence. Sunwoo leaned back, watching through the tinted glass as one of his younger enforcers wrapped a dry coat around Curtis on the sidewalk. Jin slid into the passenger seat, glancing at Sunwoo through the rearview mirror. He drummed his fingers on the dashboard, a rare sign of agitation. "Boss," he started, keeping his voice low, "we're already late for the sit-down with the elders. If we don't show, it looks like weakness." Sunwoo didn't answer immediately. He rolled the 3 damp dollar bills between his fingers, the paper soft and disintegrating. "It's a kid, Sunwoo," Jin pressed, turning in his seat to face him. "A stray. You gave him food, fine, that's charity. But you can't actually be thinking about chasing down a phantom van based on an 8-year-old's testimony. We have a syndicate to run." "I took his money, Jin." "It's $3. "It's a contract," Sunwoo corrected, his eyes snapping up to meet his lieutenant's gaze. The temperature in the car seemed to drop. "In this world, a man is only as good as his word. If I take a payment, the job gets done. Whether it's $3 million or $3, a client is a client." Jin sighed, knowing that tone. It was the tone Sunwoo used right before people disappeared. "And the target, he said a snake tattoo. That could be anyone." "No," Sunwoo said, slipping the money into his breast pocket over his heart. "Snake tattoo, white van, snatching girls off the street in broad daylight. That isn't anyone. That's the Viper Tong." Jin stiffened. The Vipers were filth, low-level chaos agents who had been testing the boundaries of the district for months. "If the Vipers are taking children in my district, then they aren't just breaking the law. They are disrespecting me. Nobody operates in my district without my permission, and nobody touches a child on my watch." He pulled out his phone. "Wake everyone up," Sunwoo ordered into the phone. "Close the gambling dens, shut down the ports. I want every ear on the pavement and every eye on the street. We're looking for a white van and a snake on the neck." The city didn't just wake up. It screamed. Sunwoo's order rippled through the district like a high-voltage current, turning the shadowed corners of K-Town into interrogation rooms. In a basement arcade on 32nd Street, the music died as a bat shattered a pinball machine. A dealer was pinned against the glass, staring into the eyes of Sunwoo's enforcer. "White van," the enforcer barked, spit flying. "Snake tattoo. Speak or bleed." In the alley behind the fish market, a fence who specialized in stolen watches was dangled by his ankles over a dumpster until he gave up a license plate number. The 7 stars were turning the city upside down, shaking it until the truth fell out of its pockets. While his men applied blunt force to the streets, Sunwoo applied a scalpel to the system. He walked into the 12th precinct like he owned the building. The desk sergeant looked up, saw the bespoke suit and the cold, dead eyes, and immediately looked back down at his paperwork. Sunwoo didn't stop until he reached the glass-walled office at the back. He didn't knock. He kicked the door open. Captain Miller was halfway through a stale donut, his feet up on a desk cluttered with ignored files. He choked, scrambling upright as Sunwoo stepped inside and closed the blinds. "Sunwoo!" Miller sputtered, wiping sugar from his lip. "You can't just walk in here. We have an arrangement. I stay out of your way, you keep the bodies out of my district." "You broke the arrangement," Sunwoo said, his voice terrifyingly calm. He picked up a file from the pending stack, Deborah's file, and tossed it onto the desk. "You ignored a client of mine." Miller glanced at the file and let out a nervous laugh. That's nothing. Some runaway teen. The kid, her brother, he's been pestering my officers for 2 days. We told him to go home. Kids run off, Sunwoo. It happens." "She didn't run off. She was taken by the Viper Tongue." Miller's face went pale. "The Vipers? Look, if it's them, we can't touch that. They're reckless. They shoot back. I have officers with families." Sun Wu leaned across the desk. So because you are a coward, you told an 8-year-old boy his sister abandoned him? You let a child starve in a closet because you were too scared to do your job?
I didn't know about the closet, Miller stammered. You didn't know because you didn't look. Sun Wu straightened his tie, the movement sharp and precise. I'm doing the job you wouldn't. My men are tearing this city apart. If I see a single patrol car, if I hear a single siren interfering with my hunt, I will consider you an accomplice to the kidnappers. He turned to the door, pausing with his hand on the frame. And Miller, if that girl isn't found alive, I'm coming back here, and I won't be looking for a file. He walked out, leaving the captain trembling. The breakthrough didn't come from a surveillance camera or a coerced snitch. It came from the invisible part of the city, the people the rest of the world stepped over without looking down. Jin's call came at 3:14 a.m. We found someone, under the Western Expressway. He says he saw the van. Sun Wu's Sagan tore through the slick streets, arriving at the overpass minutes later. 2 of his enforcers were standing guard near a makeshift shelter of cardboard and plastic tarps. Sitting on a milk crate, shivering in a coat 3 sizes too big, was an elderly man known to the streets only as Ghost. He clutched a half-empty bottle of soju like it was a holy relic. Sun Wu stepped out of the car. The rain had softened to a drizzle, but the air was biting cold. He gestured for his men to step back and walked toward the man. They say you saw something, Sun Wu said, his voice devoid of threat. He didn't need to intimidate a man who had nothing left to lose. Ghost looked up, his eyes milky. The white van, he croaked. 2 nights ago. They stopped right there, dumped some trash bags, but the trash was screaming. Sun Wu felt the rage simmer in his chest, hot and tight. Did you see who was driving? Snakes, the old man whispered, tracing a line down his own grime-streaked neck. Men with snakes crawling up their skin. They laughed. They threw a girl in the back. She was fighting, kicking. One of them hit her. Where did they go? Ghost pointed toward the river, toward the skyline of rusted cranes and decaying warehouses. The iron yards, the old shipping zone, only the rats and the snakes. The iron yards. It made perfect sense. It was a labyrinth of rusted shipping containers and abandoned factories, a blind spot in the city's surveillance grid. It was Viper Tong territory, a place where they could move cargo, whether drugs or humans, without anyone asking questions. Sun Wu reached into his jacket pocket. He didn't pull out a weapon. He pulled out a thick roll of cash, securing the rubber band. He pressed it into the old man's rough, dirt-stained hand. Get a hotel room tonight, Sun Wu said quietly. Get a warm meal, and forget you ever saw me. Ghost stared at the money, but Sun Wu was already turning away. Jin, Sun Wu called out as he slid back into the sedan. Tell the boys to load up. We're going to the iron yards. And the rules? Jin asked. Sun Wu looked out at the industrial wasteland. We are hunting animals, he said coldly, so we leave no witnesses. Sun Wu stood on the rooftop of a half-finished high-rise, the biting soul wind whipping the edges of his charcoal overcoat. He dialed a number that wasn't saved in any directory. It rang 3 times before a rasping, arrogant voice picked up. I didn't think you had the stomach to call, Sun Wu. The leader of the Iron Dragon Syndicate sneered. Background noise, the low thrum of a warehouse and the distant, muffled sound of a child's sob made Sun Wu's jaw tighten. You have the girl, Sun Wu said, his voice a low, dangerous velvet. Whatever debt you think is owed, it doesn't belong to her. The man on the other end laughed. In this city, everything belongs to the man who can take it. She's a beautiful little chip, Sun Wu. Maybe I'll keep her. Maybe I'll sell her back to her father piece by piece. Sun Wu looked out at the horizon. I am giving you one chance. Release the girl unharmed. Leave her at the shrine in the park within the hour. If you do this, I will forget your name. If you refuse, there will be nothing left of you but ash. This is a gift of mercy." The line went dead with a mocking click. Sun Wu dropped the phone, hearing it shatter. He pulled on black leather gloves. "Diplomacy is over," he murmured. The warehouse sat like a rotting carcass at the edge of the docks, shrouded in a thick, salty mist that muffled the sound of the rising tide. Inside, the Iron Dragon Syndicate felt secure behind their rusted iron doors and arrogant laughter. But outside, the shadows were beginning to move. Sun Wu stood at the perimeter, a silent ghost in the dark. Beside him, 4 of his elite enforcers waited for the signal. Their gear was matte black and specialized, built for the quiet efficiency of a surgical strike. With a slight tilt of Sun Wu's head, the team fanned out. They moved with the synchronized grace of a single organism. The first guard stood smoking near the side entrance. Before he could even exhale, a gloved hand clamped over his mouth, while a precise strike sent him into instant unconsciousness. There was no struggle. Only the soft rustle of fabric as his body was lowered gently to the concrete. Sun Wu stepped inside, his eyes adjusting to the dim amber glow. The air smelled of oil and old greed. He moved through the labyrinth of stacked shipping crates, his footsteps lighter than the scurrying rats. Above, on the catwalks, 2 more guards patrolled with flashlights. Sun Wu didn't look up. He trusted his men. High above, 2 suppressed whispers of air hissed through the rafters, and the guards slumped where they sat, neutralized before their lights could even sweep the floor. Every door was breached with a whisper, every lookout silenced before a finger could reach a trigger. Sun Wu reached the central office, a glass-walled structure elevated above the main floor. Through the smudged windows, he saw the syndicate leader sitting behind a cluttered desk, still nursing a glass of cheap whiskey, oblivious to the fact that his empire had been hollowed out. In the corner, tied to a wooden chair, was the girl. Her head was bowed, her small shoulders shaking with silent exhaustion. Sun Wu felt a cold, sharp spark of protective fury. He checked the tactical display on his wrist. His men were in position. The perimeter was sealed. The exits were ghosted. He stepped out of the shadows and onto the main floor, the clicking of his dress shoes finally breaking the silence. The glass door of the elevated office didn't just open, it yielded to Sun Wu's presence. The syndicate leader bolted upright. For a frantic heartbeat, the man looked toward the monitors on his desk, only to see a dozen screens displaying nothing but empty hallways. How did you get in here?" the leader stammered. His eyes darted toward the girl in the corner. Desperation took hold. He lunged for her, his hand reaching for a jagged blade on the desk, intending to pull her small frame in front of him as a human shield. He was fast, but Sun Wu was a phantom. Before the leader's fingers could even graze the girl's hair, Sun Wu closed the distance. Sun Wu's hand lashed out, catching the man's wrist with a sickening crack. With a fluid twist of his body, Sun Wu drove his elbow into the man's solar plexus, folding him like paper. The blade clattered uselessly to the floor. Sun Wu didn't follow up with a finishing blow. Instead, he stood over the gasping man and tossed a sleek silver data drive onto the desk. On that drive is every offshore account, every human trafficking route, and every bribed official in your network, Sun Wu said. The authorities are already 3 minutes away. By the time they arrive, your empire will be a matter of public record. The leader looked up, clutching his broken wrist. "Kill me, just get it over with. You're Sun Wu, you don't leave witnesses." Sun Wu looked down at him with freezing indifference. "I promised you mercy. Death would be an escape from the life you've earned.
you will spend the rest of your days in a concrete box, forgotten by the city you tried to steal." Sun Wu turned his back on the ruined man and knelt beside the girl. The terrifying predator vanished, replaced by a man of unexpected gentleness. He sliced through her zip ties with a single, steady motion. "It's over, Lily. You're safe now." The girl looked up, her brown eyes shimmering with tears. She threw her small arms around his neck. Sun Wu stood, lifting her easily. As he stepped out into the cool harbor air, Lily fell asleep against his shoulder, finally at peace. The drive back toward the city center was silent. The girl, Lily, lay curled on the leather seat beside Sun Wu, her head resting on his lap. He had draped his charcoal overcoat over her small frame. He looked down at her, his hand resting near her shoulder. Not the hand of a killer, but a steady anchor. Outside, the city began to transition. The harsh neon of the underworld faded into the soft, bruised purples of the pre-dawn sky. Sun Wu stared out the window. He had spent decades ensuring his name inspired fear, believing that power was the only way to survive. Yet, as he felt the slight, trusting weight of the child against him, the victories of the night felt different. They didn't feel like a conquest. They felt like a debt being paid to his own soul. His phone vibrated. It was a message from his lead enforcer. "Site cleared. Police have custody of the syndicate. No traces left back to us." Sun Wu didn't reply. Instead, he looked at the dashboard clock. The sun would be rising soon, a new day for a family that had nearly been destroyed. He thought of Curtis, the man who had stood on a street corner with nothing but 3 crumpled dollars and a father's desperation. In the circles Sun Wu ran in, men killed for millions and betrayed for even less. But that man had offered his entire world for a chance he wasn't even sure existed. It was a strength Sun Wu hadn't encountered in a very long time. "Are we almost there?" Lily whispered, her eyes fluttering open. Sun Wu looked down at her, the corners of his eyes softening. "Almost. Your father is waiting for you." "Did you find my drawing?" she asked. Sun Wu reached into his inner vest pocket and pulled out the crinkled paper she had made for him, the one showing the tall man, the girl, and the woman holding hands. "I kept it right here," he said. She took the paper, clutching it to her chest, and for the first time, a small, genuine spark of joy returned to her face. The first rays of dawn broke over the horizon. Sun Wu's black sedan glided to a halt at the same curb where, only days ago, a desperate man had approached a tinted window. Curtis was already there. When the car door opened, he froze. Lily stepped out first. For a second, father and daughter simply stared at one another. Then a cry broke from Curtis's throat as Lily sprinted across the pavement. He caught her mid-air, falling to his knees and burying his face in her hair. Deborah emerged next, and the three of them formed a tight, unbreakable circle of salt and tears. Sun Wu stepped out of the car, leaning against the doorframe. He watched them in silence. Curtis finally looked up and walked toward Sun Wu. He reached into his pocket, pulling out the $3 he had carried like a talisman. "I don't know how to thank you," Curtis whispered, "but I have the rest of the payment. I'll find a way." Sun Wu held up a hand. He reached into his own pocket and pulled out a crisp, white envelope. He pressed it into Curtis's hand. "Inside is your $3, Sun Wu said, "and a card. If the world ever tries to get heavy again, you call that number, directly." Curtis opened the envelope, his eyes widening as he saw the small bills and the embossed black card. "But the fee, the contract." Sun Wu looked at the little girl and back at Curtis. For the first time in years, the cold mask of the chairman didn't just crack, it vanished. A small, genuine smile touched his lips. "Service was on the house," Sun Wu said. He didn't wait for a response. He slid back into the car. As the sedan pulled away, Sun Woo watched the small family in the rearview mirror until they were just a speck. He had lost a fortune in resources, but he felt richer than he ever had before. If you're currently wiping away tears, smash that like button. Subscribe to join our community for more stories about the smallest heroes. Now, I have to know, which moment absolutely destroyed you? Drop a comment below and let's talk about that miracle. Thanks for being here to witness the contract that changed everything. See you on the next one.